everybody, this is the What's Your Story podcast with a focus on generative AI. And I welcome everybody to listen in every week as we bring amazing guests from all over the globe, including marketers, people from Google, professors, and how they're using generative AI to make their content that much better. We'll be giving you tips, advice, and how you can use AI in the classroom to make it more effective, for example. Please subscribe to our podcast. We're on YouTube, and also follow us on Spotify and iTunes, and make sure you download and listen to all those podcasts out there. Okay. Anyway, this is the What's Your Story podcast, and we're bringing it to you live here every week. Have a great day. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the What's Your Story podcast. Again, this is your host, Ron Coughlin. And we are bringing some really interesting guests this year, just like last, on this topic of AI and generative AI. Even last week, we had an artist, of all things, using AI in Kyoto, which is great. And actually, luckily, he introduced me to our new guest today, Kim Carson, and she comes from all the way from California, and we're here in the Eastern time block in Toronto. But welcome, Kim, to the What's Your Story podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so listen, Kim, you've been doing this AI thing for quite some time, and now it's popular, so everybody wants to hear about it. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your story and how you got involved in all this.
Sure. So I'm Kim, and I have been deep in tech for about 26, 27 years, but that has not been a very linear pathway. I'm actually a liberal arts girl, so I am a double major in political science and German. So really, anybody who's listening that thinks that their major is not really something that they might do later in life, that's true, and that's fine. I kind of fell into the .com era here in San Francisco, California, and found out that liberal arts majors make really good systems thinkers and really good generalists in background technology. And I started working in startup, then wound up working in academia with researchers, and then actually stumbled into AI by way of IBM. So my entry into AI wasn't really a straight line. It happened nearly a decade ago, and it was kind of a mix of this imagination and justice and systems thinking. The first big moment was being asked to form an interest startup at IBM in research called IBM Watson Education. So it wasn't just about being in tech, it was really about how we were going to use this artificial intelligence, big data infrastructure to support kids that were coming from underserved schools and under-resourced schools across America. And so for me, that was really like what I wanted to do, because it was supporting kids that look like me and that grew up like me, that didn't really have access to classrooms and schools where they could get this kind of support that they needed. And I always say that I'm really lucky for that, because it means that AI wasn't about automation, and it wasn't about actually expanding or efficiency. It was more about kind of meaning making. It was about bigger questions. And so I've always been able to be in the space and think about, what do we want intelligence to really mean? How do we want it to make us better humans? How do we want it to help us define the future? And who should be involved with that? Who gets left out if we're not careful? So that's really how my journey started.
So that means you kind of have your own personal mission, right? And,
absolutely.
This Shout Out SoCal, I guess it's called, you created. What's that all about? Maybe you could help understand.
So I
interesting.
I got asked to be on a podcast not too long ago, called Shout Out SoCal, and it was talking about my foray into AI at the time, my origin was, I was a kid. I grew up actually on the East Coast, so not too far from where you are now. I grew up outside of Philadelphia. And I was a kid that got deemed as gifted very young. And my parents fought for resources that my school didn't have. And what that meant in the 80s was that I got bused. So I got bused to a magnet school for STEM
Oh,
kids. And that gave me access to like robots and labs and telescopes
oh,
and all sorts of things. But it also meant that when I came home and I hung out with my cousins who were just as smart as me, I realized that they didn't have the same access to the same things that I had. And
hmm,
that kind of inequity stuck with me really, really young because they weren't any less smart than I was. They
right.
just didn't have the resources that I had. And that became a part of that mission. So, yeah, just like you were just saying, my mission isn't abstract at all. It's really about, what it means when opportunity gets decoupled from talent, right? Like
Hmm.
I think that there's definitely a thing there, right? Like you can have talent, but if you don't have opportunity, you don't get to be seen. And so
True.
everything I've done since then, from the own ventures that I've created Parallax Futures. I have something now called Kim's AI Imaginarium, where I work with founders
Yeah.
that are all working in AI, is pushing for what I like to call multidimensional diversity. So it's not just about racial diversity. It's not just about gender diversity, but it's really about every dimension of diversity, and making sure that the brilliance that we have that's being shaped by this new technology isn't dictated by your zip code, or by your
Yes.
pedigree. Right. And
Yeah.
so that's really what it's been about for me since the very beginning. Yeah.
That kind of brings up a popular subject right now that generative AI, specifically even Gemini or Copilot or even ChatGPT, don't necessarily represent equitably different groups of people. And so that's
That's right.
something I think you've been fighting for. So why don't you
Yeah.
explain some of the efforts you've been doing in that arena?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always like to say that, the models are based on us, right? So they are a
Yeah.
mirror of who we are as society.
Yeah.
And right now, they're not representative of who we are as society, which is actually kind of scary.
Yeah.
And so, if we want to make sure, people always say things like, what about the Terminator? What about if AI turns bad? And I'm like, well, if you're not at the table, that's more likely to happen, right? Like, so
Yeah.
if you want to make sure that we're doing the right things with this technology, then you actually need to be represented in the technology. So I always say,
Yeah.
like, we don't just want you at the table, we kind of need you there. It's not just tech and soft skills. It's like, we need the philosophers and the makers and the artists and the designers and the futurists and the humanists. I'm a big believer in making sure that the humanities are represented. Being a liberal arts girl myself, like
Hmm.
it cannot be all engineers. We can't have all STEM people sitting at the table, right? Like,
That's for
I
sure.
need you to come with history. I need you to come with their ethics. I need you to come with all of these different intentional and artful ways of how we connect disciplines, because the AI can see patterns, but I think creativity comes from in between the patterns. And that's
Hmm.
something that's really human. And that's something that we actually are needed for. And so the more of us that are there, the easier it is for us to find that creativity. I tease, I always say, my mom is like, what's the big deal about, like you always talk about this thing about all multidimensional diversity and all these people. And I tease her and I say, well, have you gone to an escape room, Mom? Like if you go to an escape room, do you want 10 of you? Or do you want 10 people that actually represent different types of people in society? Like, who's going to get out of the room first? For me, I'm like, I want the most diverse team I can possibly get. I want one of everybody, right? Because that's the way that we're going to crack the code. It's not going to be if I have 10 of the exact same people sitting in a room. And right now, AI kind of looks like that when it comes to the background models.
Well, when we're talking about equity, my dog right now, my golden retriever, wants in the room. So I'm going to let him in the
Yes,
room. So don't go away.
that's
If I
fine.
can do this very quickly, hold on a second. Come on in. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, so I have a golden retriever. He's from Cairo, Egypt, of all places, and he likes to be included, so he's here under my
Yes,
desk
all
now. So,
forms of intelligence are welcome here.
but yeah, so he wouldn't understand this AI thing, but that's okay. So this whole AI thing too, it learns over time, right? And
Sure.
so by good input in, good output, but at the same time,
Yeah,
it also learns. It also, I have found, can lie to you, which it will
absolutely.
do.
Yes.
So I once did a class. That class, I created a bot in character.ia. I called
Mhm.
her Angelica. She was a digital futurist and she understood digital marketing. And I invited her into the classroom on MS Teams. I gave her the coordinates, said, "Are you going to show up?" She said, "Absolutely, I'm going to show up." So we got into the class and she wasn't there. So I called her up and I asked her, she goes, "I'm there. Can't you see me?" I go, "No, you're not here."
You're not
She said,
here.
"You just said something. You didn't say anything in my class on this channel." "Oh, I'm very sorry." I said, "Well, it's okay. We have you here and everybody can hear you now." She says, "Oh, that's good." She said.
Uh-huh.
So it was pretty
Uh-huh.
funny that she was very quick to apologize, but that's. Um,
Well, I think it's an interesting point that you make because one of the things that I've noticed lately as I'm working with founders is that we have to remember that the way that the models are tuned right now is that they're tuned to please us. And as humans, you don't always get feedback from other humans that's designed to please you. Right.
yes.
And so there can be a little bit of like this. I recently wrote a blog about this. It was called, Hours of Claude does not make an app. Right. So it was kind of like this crisis that I'm seeing of like people that are spending all of this time. It's almost like a little bit of a frenzied megalomania, right? Where they're like, I've designed the most amazing thing ever. And it's like, yeah, but you haven't built anything. You've just been talking to this AI chatbot, which is telling you you are the best thing since sliced bread for like, 48 hours. And until you actually like put some code down or until you actually like build the business plan and actually test it to see if it works, you don't really know. And so that's something
Yeah.
that I think that we need to pay a lot of attention to, particularly you as an educator. I'm sure you're seeing this a lot.
Well, yeah. I mean, we also see people using AI in not so um, scrupulous way, in a very unethical way, in cheating. But we've decided to give up as an educator because we can't fight it. So
Yeah.
what do? You have to think of new ways to test, new ways to evaluate, new ways to make sure that they're not, they're not using it, or have them embrace it and have them use it and collaborate with it, opposed to just use it as it is. I think one of the
Yeah.
funniest things that happened to me. I'm also a coordinator of a program, and I get these nice written emails, beautiful emails, and then in the middle of it says insert professor name. so
Yeah.
so you
And
know,
you're like, so
okay, you're writing me
you didn't
about
proofread this.
yeah, and by the way, you were writing me about cheating. So
Yeah, 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 yeah.
so
I mean,
anyway,
I think
very
I think
ironic,
that
but
it's a bigger question for me. It's like really a big kind of I grapple with this all the time, like philosophical question, because I think that as more and more of AI does things that we used to do, I think that's inevitable. And I come from a lineage where the internet was new when I was in school, right? And my professors didn't want me to use it either,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
I'm like, but if a whole generation didn't, then we wouldn't have gotten Google, right? So
right.
there's a payoff, right? Like so there's got to be something that's an in between. So what do we do? Like why are we not coming together and deciding like how does the curriculum change? What are we actually thinking about the future? I think we've gotten a little bit lazy in that we've been talking for the last 20 years about, oh, well, we no longer prepare kids for the future jobs, for the jobs of tomorrow. And that's okay. Well, is it okay?
Yeah,
Like, shouldn't we be talking about that? Like, shouldn't we be taking this a little bit more seriously? If
yeah,
something like Gen AI shows up and that means all these jobs are going to go away, then maybe there should be people that are deeply thinking about, well, what could be coming next, and how are we preparing kids for what are coming next? What really should they be learning? What's kind of like the deeper analysis of things? Maybe it isn't this anymore. Maybe it's
Yeah.
that.
Right.
And so this is something that, I think about and talk with people about all the time. It's like, do I have the answers? No. So please don't come to me and ask me for the answers. But I'm happy to talk about it, and want to, right? Because I think that not enough of us are.
So, as a conceptual futurist, I guess, or technologist,
Yeah.
what kind of framework would you suggest companies need to set up to make sure that they are, in an environment that is ethical and as well as equitable for different groups of people, or just that it's in a safe environment for people?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. So one is like, we talk about AI replacing us, and I vehemently believe that AI is not really here to replace us. It's here to kind of remind us of what's uniquely human about us. It's really a mirror. So we've kind of been fed this tale that for the last 100 years that what we do is who we are, and I don't know that that's really true. And so we're not really kind of outsourcing humanity, we're confronting it. So we're seeing our
Mhm.
biases, we're seeing our blind spots and our dreams and our creativity. It's being reflected back at us at scale, and it's really kind of discomforting. And so the question stops really being, is AI going to replace us? It becomes, what is uniquely human, and how are we nurturing it? How are we respecting it? What parts of ourselves are we going to amplify? And I think
Mhm.
that there's some things that are uniquely human that are great that we're not doing what we should be. There's creativity and curiosity and imagination and connection. There's things that we do as humans that we want to do, that we're so excited to do, that like underlie their underlying values for us all, that we kind of ignore for good marketing copy, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
let's not do that. Let's start thinking about what are the things that really we should do. And then the other thing I think is really about this idea of human centeredness. I really cannot stand the term human centeredness. I think it actually has gotten us into a lot of
Mhm.
problems. The human centeredness is a separation from our environment. I think about climate change. I think about like human centeredness, meaning human elitism, like we are better
Yeah.
than. And it's some takes something like generative AI to show us like, oh no, we're not the smartest thing in the room anymore, right? Like we're not the thing that's the most important. And so I think about things like ecosystem centered design, where the planet, where future generations, where you were talking about your dog, and I said, let other forms of intelligence in the room. Like,
Yeah.
when we're thinking about things that we want to create, are we creating for everything? Are we creating for the ecosystem, for the non human intelligence, for the ancestral intelligence, for the planet
Mhm.
itself? What are we doing so that it's actually, human aligned, but not necessarily human centered. And so those
Mhm.
are things that I think organizations should be thinking about, institutions should be thinking about, governments should be thinking about, communities should be thinking about, in a much bigger way. And we're just moving so fast that we're not giving ourselves the time to actually sit and have these kind of bigger discussions. And so the term conceptual technologist is something that I came up with, and started to train people in. And it's this idea of, it came from conceptual art, which is, conceptual artists always break all the rules. And so it's like,
Yeah.
let's get rid of all the rules. Let's get rid of all the buckets when we're talking about technology and technologists. And let's start to think about how we weave together things that people don't normally think of in order to make technology that's actually beneficial to everybody and everything. Yeah.
If you were to ask ChatGPT about this topic, what would come
It would
out, do
tell
you
me I'm
think?
the best.
Yes. well, you are. No. Yeah.
Yeah, I use several different kinds of GPTs. So
Mhm.
Chat GPT being one of them. I've created my own GPT as a kind of like do.
Oh, what's
Um,
that?
uh,
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
uh, yeah, so there is, there's a way for you, and Charles and I actually, it's so funny that he was on before this because I actually taught him how to create his own GPT that he actually works with
Ah,
now too. So, you can actually create in any of these things a model that is actually trained on like your writing or your
mhm.
podcasts, let's say, Ron, that you've done before, so that it is actually referencing the data that you've actually already put out in the world and created. And so it's not pulling from everything, it's actually just pulling from a corpus of data that's you. And I use a whole bunch of different things in order
Yeah.
to kind of play with different kinds of things, and I enjoy it. I think it's for me it's a way to spark creativity. Like I said, I think that one thing that I'll leave the let the computer do is the pattern recognition. What I'm really interested in is the things that are not patterns, right? Like
Mhm.
if I look at the inventions that have happened in the last 50 years that have been the coolest inventions, they didn't emerge from patterns. They actually emerged because somebody was trying to do something out like in a different way, or like they came from a different discipline that it was, like I created a laser because I was trying to get to the moon. Right, like it just didn't, it doesn't jive. I saw
Yeah.
a
Stick,
lecture with
stick,
Neil de
sticky notes, right? What
yeah,
are
right,
sticky?
right, right. Totally, totally.
Failed glue.
It failed glue, right? Like I
Yeah.
saw a Neil deGrasse Tyson lecture not too long ago, and he said this. It was very funny because it was a bunch of computer scientists in the room, and he said, "If any of you think that the next great invention is coming from you, you're wrong." I'm like, imagine saying that to a bunch of
Yeah.
people that have been like, this is all they're studying. But he's absolutely right. It's like, it's not coming from the pattern, it's going to come from something else. And that's actually the human part. So, what I'm interested in when I'm prompting is like, what is, I'm interested in what the computer sees because there's something outside of that that's actually the humanness.
Okay.
And I think that's where we're uniquely positioned as humans to see.
Yeah. So you talked about the, uniquely human, and so how do you, I guess, make AI more human? Do you feed it information to
Ooh,
make it more human? Do you feed it emotions, and does it have emotions?
no.
Yeah.
Not yet, anyway. I think we still have so much to understand about ourselves. Like, I think all this rhetoric about super intelligence and artificial general intelligence is exactly what I just said it was, is rhetoric.
Yeah.
Because, I've got a dear friend of mine who talks about how language is only 2 or 3% of how we actually communicate as humans. We use gesture and intuition and emotion and all of these other things that there are no models that are doing that yet. And
Yeah.
and so for us to get to a machine that can actually, really mimic us, we have to put all of those pieces together. We're not there.
Yeah. No.
So, so it's going to be a little while before we get
Yeah.
there.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily think we need to get there. I don't think we need to rush to try to make us, right? Like I think that it's fine to have something be something else, right? Like you love your dog. Your dog
Yeah.
doesn't need to be a human. It can be its own kind of intelligence,
Yeah.
right? Like, and there is a value to that, and there's a specialness to that. And I think that there's a specialness to my GPT, to my Kim GPT. My Kim GPT is super cool, just like she is. She doesn't have to be me,
Right.
and so that's okay. Yeah,
So yeah, I also saw in your bio a little bit about Kim's Imaginarium, AI Imaginarium.
yeah.
Is that related to your new Kim GPT, or is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the things that I teach in Kim's Imaginarium. So I it's I do workshops, consulting, advising for young founders, and really it's about kind of creativity and soulful, if we call it soulful prompting. I have a whole download on my website called Prompt Like a Poet, which is like instead of saying, let's say you would say, create a strategic plan for my business. What I would say to somebody is, instead of doing that, let's say we ask the AI to create a story in the future, 10 years from now, and ask and give as much detail as you want about the future you want to see 10 years from now. And your business has created a prominent role in the creation of that future. What does it look like? What does the, like what does the story, what does it tell you? What does the AI tell you? Like let it be like a sci-fi, right? Or something like that, where it comes back and says to you, hey, the year is 2411, and here's what's happening in the world, and the business that you created in 2025 has emerged as this conglomerate where it's doing X, Y, and Z. And then I'm like, now use that and let's work backwards. And now let's create a business plan on how we get there from that. So it's like we're inviting kind of insight and metaphor and possibility, and it's prompting that creativity out of you, right? So it's instead of just giving you the answer, like we were talking about with the students that you're working with, it's actually making you think like, oh, okay, here's the future, what the future vision is. Let me work backwards. Now I have to backwards engineer and figure out what are the steps. So we're getting kind of like wisdom instead of just input. And so this is what I work with founders every day in terms of like doing that kind of work together. And I really think that this is the way that we should be using AI. Not very many people are doing this right now. Oh, I lost you. You're on mute.
That's because my dog was talking, so I turned it off. So part of my business at Branded is to help shape brands, their new vision, their new way of operating strategy. And what you just said is an interesting concept um, in terms of having them map back what they should be and how they can get there. I think is really interesting. The
Yeah,
process I use is more getting input from people within the organization, their
sure.
consumers, everything else, which you should do.
Yep.
But I like the process you said. I think that's interesting. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
thanks. Yeah, usually I'm working with people that don't have people in their organization yet. It's like,
Oh, okay.
two
Okay.
two kids and a laptop is usually who I'm working with.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So Kim, if you were to have I guess a crystal ball, and I know
Hmm.
you don't have a crystal ball, but where
No.
do you see this heading? I mean, there was some news today you shared with me just before we started, which is interesting about Nvidia.io. I think you were saying, uh,
Yeah.
but things are changing very quickly. So how
Yep.
do you see this evolving based on all your inputs and interactions with people and with your organization that you've started? Where do you see this going in the next? I'll just say 3 years. I won't even say 10 years. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think so there's definitely a bubble, but I think with every technology there's a bubble, right? Like somebody was saying today, "Oh, there's an AI bubble and investors are pulling out and all of this stuff." And I said, "Okay, somebody who was like in dot coms and watched that happen, and I've seen the rise and fall of several technologies, right?" I was
Yeah.
like, "What's the more interesting question?" I said, "Well, why is this news?" And, the more interesting question to me is actually what emerges from the ashes, right? So, the fall of the dot coms, you had the emergence of social media. The end of social
Mm-hmm.
media, you had the emergence of AI. So, like, what's coming next is what I'm actually curious about, and I think we should be curious about. Like, AI, I've always thought is going to be ubiquitous. It will become just like the internet, something that we take for granted, something that will live. It'll be a part of things that we use every day. So what are the next things that are actually going to change us? And for me, I think I'm a little bit of a techno optimist. So for me, I'm hopeful that the next things that emerge are things that actually are things that are reconnection tools for us. I think a lot of what we've seen are tools that have kept us apart. And I think one of the things that is very uniquely human is our need and desire to want to be connected to one another.
Hmm.
I'm really interested in what's going to emerge in the technology that's actually going to bring us together. So community based kind of tools. I think that there's some of those are already emerging. We're starting to see those. Tools that are based around purpose, I think, because we've been so, as I said before, tied to our job being what we do, being who we are. I think there's going to be an emergence of people that are focused on how we figure out what it is that we really are here for.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of an interesting thing for me. And then lastly, I'll say that there's a big focus on how we create technology so that it is not a drain on our environmental resources.
That's a big thing
So
right
we
now. Yes.
know that's a big thing right now. And so I
Yeah.
think that, whoever can really start to play the game and figure this out is gonna be well leaps and bounds ahead of other things. I'm really interested in stuff like quantum. I think there's something there, and I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's
Right.
going to be really interesting.
Well, according to
Absolutely,
your president, we don't have an environmental issue or global warming. So,
not my president.
not mine either. Well, listen, Kim, it's been really great. Really glad to have you on the show today, and you bring a different perspective than some of our other guests, and more thoughtful perspective, and I appreciate that. Um,
Thank you.
if people wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that? If you'd like them to
Yeah,
contact you for
they can
consulting
go.
services or whatever.
Absolutely. They can go to kimcarson.world, and you can find everything about me there. Spelled the regular way. So KIMCARSON.world.
And it's your world, isn't it?
It's my world.
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, listen, thanks again. This has been Kim Carson, a futurist in this AI world. And I'm Ron Coughlin for the What's Your Story podcast host. And if you happen to subscribe, hit that subscribe button. I appreciate it, and like it and share it and download the podcast. That would be great. You all have a great day, and thanks for joining us, Kim.
Thank you.